Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, here in New York City. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, if you're following this day for general session out there on the World Wide Web. Intel are up next. I've been waiting for this session for a long time. The first people to put the longest faraway date in the title of their presentation of the whole show, Cloud 2015. What is not to like? Let's hear what Intel's vision is of that future. Give it up, please, for Jason Waxman from Intel. Enjoy.
Good morning. Before I begin, a little bit about my group at Intel. We are a team focused in on technologies and products for large data center customers. And as you imagine, that includes cloud computing. When you're at Intel, you talk to a lot of different customers, and customers have a lot of different meanings to you, meaning that you've got customers that are building equipment like OEMs, you've got other solutions vendors out there, you have the data center customers, you have the end users, the consumers, and our team spends a lot of time talking to each of them about what they want or what they need from cloud computing. And really that's the basis of the talk today, is to look at, for the next couple of years, what is it that companies need? And so what you'll hear from me is a hypothesis. And this hypothesis is that if we want to move things forward, it's not going to be about competing with each other. It's not going to be about how my API is a better API than someone else's API. It's about how do we move the industry forward in a collaborative manner? How can we work together to lay the roads and put the infrastructure in place? And I like the comment from the member on the other panel that when we look into the next couple of years, cloud computing is just going to become ubiquitous. It's going to be another term like internet or client-server computing, where at some point in time it was different, so we needed a name, but then at some point it just became ubiquitous. It's just how computing in the data center is going to be done. And to go make a transition like this happen, and at Intel we've been through a few of these, you need to work with the industry, and you need to have standards, and you need to have interoperability. IDC has estimated that cloud services could be a $60 billion opportunity each year by the time we reach 2015. My belief is the only way to get there is to do it in a very collaborative approach. So what I'm going to talk about is, number one, what are we hearing as requirements from customers and the needs in the industry? Number two, what does the vision for 2015 look like from an Intel perspective? And then I'm going to invite some of my colleagues up to talk. First, from the standpoint of what does the end customer need and what does the end customer want. And we'll actually have some new announcements today around some of the usage models that are coming from what we've called the Open Data Center Alliance. Some of you may have heard of that. Then I'll actually invite one of my partners from Dell to come up and talk about how the industry and the vendor community needs to move forward and embrace open solutions for cloud computing. And then I'll come and wrap back up about how we work together as an industry to really deliver on the vision of 2015. So first I want to start with a little bit of context. When we look at what the infrastructure is going to be in 2015, there's a tremendous amount of growth and opportunity driven through cloud computing. The first element is that it's been a great collaborator in bringing together new consumers of information technology services, whether it be consumer or business-based. And right now, there are about 1.5 billion people connected to the internet in one form or another. We expect that another billion people will be connected by 2015. Second, those people aren't just going to use the smartphones and the PCs that we see today. They're going to use a whole range of different devices. And this will be TVs. You already are seeing iPads being brought into the environment. There's going to be embedded devices, signage, all of these devices connected to the internet. Today, there's about 4 billion of them connected. By 2015, that's almost going to quadruple to 15 billion connected devices. And then there's going to be more data through the use of enhanced video. We're seeing the traffic just skyrocket across the network. And we expect that by 2015, there's going to be over 1,000 exabytes of data crossing the internet on an annual basis. And so it's not just the growth of consumers, the growth of devices, and the growth of traffic. There's actually really a tremendous opportunity for new and exciting usage. So today, we take for granted the benefits that have been brought for search. If we go back to when many of us were kids and thought about the idea that you could type something into a very simple prompt and it would basically answer your question. You would have thought it would be not in your lifetime, but we take it for granted. We use it every day. But search is great, but it's really great for text, as an example. You don't really have the ability to do full video search, to really be able to parse for faces, to be able to go do voice recognition and look for content and to be able to reach that particular index. So you've got these new usages that we haven't even thought up yet that will also drive the demand for cloud computing. So there's a huge opportunity. And then the question is, what does the cloud need to look like in 5 years to go support this vision where we have more devices, more content, new usages, and new capabilities? And what I show here are the 3 key elements from the Intel perspective that we believe in listening to the collective customer base are required for Cloud 2015. The first element is around federation. I consistently hear, particularly from enterprise and from IT, that they need to see a federated cloud. It's not just enough to be able to put my data or to be able to put certain processes into a service provider. I want to be able to put it into one service provider. I want to be able to move it to another service provider. I want my data to span between my private cloud and my public cloud. And I need to do this in a means that's secure, that's seamless, that's interoperable. And when you look at where we are today, we don't have the standards in place to really do the VM interoperability that's required. We don't have the levels of transparency for security to be able to have that seamless migration of workloads and federation between different data centers. So there's work to be done there. The second element of cloud is with the data center itself. Customers are telling us they want it to be more automated. And I'm still amazed, and I've seen many of the state-of-the-art data centers out there that are fantastic. Very low PUE, highly efficient, great deals of automation. And yet still, many of the things that are supposed to be automated aren't working reliability. The way patch management is going to be done in the cloud, or updates are done in the cloud, or audits and compliance are done in the cloud, or to be able to look at where workloads are done so that you maintain an SLA, but do it in the lowest cost and the most power efficient means possible. All of the capability to manage that and to drive power efficiency still isn't fully integrated into the cloud today. So there's more work that needs to be done there over the next 5 years. And the third attribute and the third element that we believe very strongly in is that the cloud needs to be client aware. Today, many services are still being developed for very specific platforms, and the vision that we'd like to see over the next 5 years is that there's a greater ability for services to be aware of the type of client. What type of security does it have? What types of virtual machines does it have? How big is the screen size? What kinds of graphics capability? What type of compute do I do in my data center versus what type of compute can I rely on for the client itself? And how do I manage security so that I know whether I can leave data on that client or whether it should reside only in the data center itself? To be able to do that, you need to have the client capabilities exposed. You need to have awareness of the network and where clients reside on the network. So again, there's a lot more work that needs to be done to achieve this vision for Cloud 2015. And there are some pretty substantial challenges that are facing the industry at this point, and I want to highlight a couple of them. The first, and this has been ubiquitous in every customer conversation we have, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a consumer, whether it's a service provider, everybody is concerned about security. And the reality is we are not, as an industry, doing ourselves any favors in this case. In many cases, the cloud is perfectly secure. In many cases, the cloud may be more secure than a particular enterprise environment. But the perception and the press, every time there is some sort of lapse or some sort of excursion because the appropriate means, the appropriate capabilities, or the right expectation wasn't set about what the cloud can go ahead and do, we have this perception that the cloud is insecure, that you can't trust the cloud. And the result is that enterprises don't achieve the efficiency because they're concerned and sitting on the sidelines. And then the vendor community and the service provider community doesn't see and realize the full potential of that business. We need to see a more secure cloud. 70% of respondents in this IDC survey said that was their number one concern in moving to cloud computing. So we have a lot of work that we need to do there. The second thing that I wanted to highlight is around efficiency. And somebody mentioned in the previous panel that they had been talking about green computing, and that's obviously a focus for a lot of us here. Many of the data center enterprises that I talk to talk about how they want to be carbon neutral. They want to make sure that that's a goal for their organization. And on the vendor side, obviously, everyone wants to promote green computing. But the reality is to look at the growth that I talked about earlier, those billion new consumers, those devices, and the server infrastructure that's required to support that growth. We're looking at the need for about 45 new coal power plants to be built just to support the cloud over the next 5 years if we don't drive the right levels of efficiency and execution in the data center. And today, data centers already consume about 1 to 2% of the world's power. So we want to make sure that the cloud is deployed in an efficient manner, that the data centers are efficient, and that workloads are designed to run where they can do so most efficiently. The third element that I wanted to talk about is in manageability. And we worked on a study with Bain & Company to look at how much you collectively as an industry, not just obviously the people here in the room, but worldwide, spend on maintaining infrastructure. And when you look at the next 5 years, it sums to a whopping $2 trillion worth of spend to maintain and to deploy IT infrastructure and data centers. It's a huge amount of spend. And even just a small amount of efficiency in the manageability of those data centers can have a huge billions and billions of dollars worth of impact. And actually, I'll ask my colleague from JP Morgan and Chase in a little bit to talk more about some of the projected impacts to the industry that we think we can achieve. And the last element of concern is around lock-in. I've heard consistently from you that you want to know if you move something into the cloud or into a service provider that you can get it back out. And lock-in is also a pervasive concern both within your private cloud data centers as well as the public cloud data centers. There's a concern that if you deploy infrastructure, the whole idea of cloud is to be able to have this unified, flexible pool of compute, network, and storage. But if you're deploying proprietary equipment that creates islands that don't manage and integrate well into that data center environment, then you're breaking your cloud. You'll have little cloudlets, I guess, is what you'll have in your data center. So these are some of the challenges that we need to overcome to reach that vision for Cloud 2015. So what Intel wants to do, and this really is highlighting our strategies, there are 3 key elements I believe very strongly in to move the industry forward. And this isn't magic. It's certainly the newest transition of the day. But there's nothing about a transition of the data center industry to cloud computing that hasn't been done several times before. And the basic recipe has 3 elements to it. The first is listen to the customer. And one of the things that I'll talk about here in a moment is we've helped to try and establish a group that can act as a single and a unifying voice of the end customer and what they want to see for cloud computing. And we want to take that direction and those requirements, and we want to do it in an open standards-based manner. We want to go provide the right products and technologies. And I'll talk a little bit about what Intel wants to do, how we're going to spend our silicon budgets, our transistor budgets, the Moore's Law effect that was talked about a little bit earlier, to go provide the right technologies for security, for manageability, and to really enhance the experience based on the direction from the customer. And then last is we have to make it easier to deploy. There is a huge industry that's developing around the complexity of deploying cloud. We just want to help solve the problem of making it easier to go ahead and deploy. And we've worked on some industry programs, and I'll highlight both with my partner from Dell as well as what some of the things that Intel is doing to make it easier to deploy. So 3 steps that are going to form the structure of the rest of the presentation that we have from here. So as I mentioned, there's nothing necessarily completely new about the transition to cloud. It just happens to be the latest one. And if you look back in the history, Intel has spent a tremendous amount of time working to establish the standards for the PC infrastructure, for manageability. We helped to accelerate and pull in the projected ramp of wireless hotspots through some of our technologies and through our Wi-Fi initiatives by over 3 years. And we want to do the same thing now for cloud computing. And so the first element of that strategy that I highlighted is listening to the end customer. We helped to establish the Open Data Center Alliance. I want you to hear now from some of the leaders in the industry. This is a group of over 280 end users that have come together to drive requirements and drive usage models for cloud computing in an open, standards-based manner. And I want you to hear from what some of them have to say.
is a maturing technology that's essentially in its infancy.
The thing that's stopping the growth of cloud at the moment is people's fears around security, being locked in,
Data privacy, global regulation,
ability to know where your systems are and what's stored there.
ODCA is all about giving the end user, the enterprise, a voice in the marketplace about cloud.
来自于不同的国家，但是我们发现我们是有非常多的共同语言，我们还有很多的事情需要去做。
We would like to drive the standardization of cloud computing.
So we've started with what we think are the 8 highest profile issues that we face as an industry.
We've got the IO control model,
The provider security assurance,
Security monitoring, the regulation usage model,
carbon footprint,
standard unit of measure,
service catalog,
VM interoperability.
we're talking about how we're going to work with a plethora of different standards bodies because they're crucial to the success of ODCA. We can't do this stuff on our own.
The reason that the service providers will be so motivated to listen to the usage models is the same reason the vendors will. It is the buyers, it's the end users saying this is what we want.
The objective is to say to the cloud service providers, within 6 months, we want your roadmap for how you're going to get there.
And that's going to be the thing that helps them win that business.
We as BMW, we can use the outcome of these usage models there.
Well, Terramark, we're already back at our shop beginning to map our product roadmap.
I encourage everybody to drive these use cases with us together.
Isn't it about time we got on with doing that?
I'm actually more excited today than I was in the beginning.
So to talk more about some of the announcements and the work product that's coming out from the Open Data Center Alliance, I want to have you welcome my colleague Adrian Kunzel, Managing Director, Global Head of Engineering and Architecture for JP Morgan and Chase. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. While, yes, I am Managing Director and Global Head of Engineering and Architecture at JP Morgan Chase, I'm actually speaking to you today as part of the steering committee of the Open Data Center Alliance. You saw many of my colleagues on that committee in the video that we've just gone through. And I wanted to start with a little bit of background of why we got interested in this in the first place. We've had 10 years of an incredibly fertile, open, commoditized, collaborative technology environment that has really come to the enterprise. We've really had choice. We've had developing standards. We've had open source that we can leverage. And that has made us as IT providers within an enterprise much more creative, much more agile, much more nimble in what we do, and has taken a lot of cost out of our infrastructure. And so a couple of years ago, along comes cloud, and everybody starts talking about it, and everybody starts painting their own pictures of what they want the cloud to look like, and all the people that we talk to on a regular basis. And all the pictures are looking different. And we're sitting there as a consumer of this stuff going, oh my goodness, here comes lock-in. And that didn't feel so good. And when you then start looking at the standardization processes in the industry, I would have to say that the customers have, I guess, shirked their responsibilities to some degree in general by not participating in a lot of the standard setting bodies. So we wanted to do it differently this time. We wanted to get a group of us together to actually put down what it is we as customers are going to be needing out of this environment in a whole wealth of different categories, and start talking about those use cases, talking about those use cases with a common voice to our valued providers, and starting to drive out of the gate standardization and interoperability within cloud infrastructure. Why do we want to do that? I have applications that live for 15 years. technologies that we're using today, I can guarantee you are not going to be the technologies in those apps that we're using tomorrow. We spend a lot of time thinking about how we refresh that stuff. We've controlled our own platforms today. We're going to be controlling less of our platforms tomorrow as we hand over more of that control to cloud infrastructure. And being able to evolve my applications and make them valuable to my business over 15 years, I have to have standards to do that. So, we didn't see a clear path, so we assembled the Open Data Center Alliance. I'll talk a little bit about its membership in a minute. Now that we've been doing this for a little while, I think this slide is probably key because a lot of people go, oh, aren't you going to stifle innovation, and isn't this going to be, nobody's going to be able to make any money or whatever. When you start reading these use cases, you're actually going to see, hopefully, that this is going to enable far more revenue generation, service adoption, and a far faster rate of adoption than I think we would see without a lot of this standardization and customer drive. Jason mentioned, I think one analyst report has a $36 billion cloud service projection next year. We think the Open Data Center Alliance can be a key player to accelerate that to something in the order of 50 billion rather than just the 36, which is great for the vendors and the service providers in the audience. For us, what does that do for us? We think it saves us about 25 billion in terms of total annual spend across all the members of the Open Data Center Alliance. So to me, that's a win-win for both sides. So it's hopefully going to be a great path that we're going to be able to walk together. So we formed the Open Data Center Alliance back in October of 2010. It was the first user-driven organization for cloud requirements. We started it out with 70 IT leaders and a pretty significant spend associated with that, which was great. Getting out of the gate with that number of people, I think, really affirmed what it was that we were trying to do in terms of drive standardization and take this into our own hands. And immediately out of the gate, we formed 5 technical working groups to actually start putting these use cases together. So where are we today? I think in 7 months, it's amazing how far we've got. I think it has stunned all of us on the steering committee. I think we've all been extremely pleased. You heard Marvin Wheeler, one of my colleagues, just at the end there saying he's more excited now than he was at the start. That goes for me too. We've just released the first set of user-driven requirements for the cloud. There's 8 use cases. You saw a very brief run-through in the video of at least their titles, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. We have 4 times the membership today, and that membership equates to over 100 billion of IT spend, which is a staggering amount of buying power when you think about it. And we've also announced yesterday or today new technical collaborators. 2 important dimensions here. You heard the comment in the video about absolutely needing to partner with standards bodies to get this work done. We have some standards bodies that we have chosen to partner with out of the gate, and we also have 4 providers, service provider organizations that have joined up with the ODCA. The first of the real service providers to join what has been over 280 consumer and customers of the data center and the cloud. So let's have a quick look at the usage models that we've come out with. They broadly fall into 4 main categories: secure federation, automation, common management and policy, and transparency. We had initially over 30 different use cases. We still have a long list of those use cases that we want to work on. But we wanted to get these 8 out of the gate to start with because they were the most burning issues that we felt as customers we were facing with cloud adoption right now in our own businesses. I'm going to pick on a couple of them and talk about them in a little more detail. I/O control. That's an interesting one because you don't actually get a lot of tools in the current tool stack to do the sort of level of I/O control that we are going to need as an organization. I have 16,000 applications that I manage across our infrastructure. I don't personally manage them, thank goodness, but we have 16,000 applications. For them to all coexist, they all have markedly different CPU, memory, and I/O requirements, and we can kind of manage the first two, but we can't manage the third particularly well. So this usage model is talking about what sorts of levels of control we need at what levels in the stack, and how we need to be able to manage, not only specify what we need, but then also provide assurance that the different resources are getting what they need from an I/O perspective. Service catalog. For those of you who are looking to or already acquiring cloud services, one of the hardest problems you have is they all have a different catalog. They're all offering you a different set of things. And not only that, they're probably pricing them by a different set of things too. So we think it's vital that we have a service catalog, at least for the common sets of capabilities. Once again, we don't want the Open Source Data Alliance to stifle creativity and innovation. But for standardized things, we want to be able to buy them in standardized ways and reason about them in standardized ways and compare one to the other in standardized terms, not comparing apples to pieces of steak, which is kind of what you have to do today, and a whole bunch of complicated math in spreadsheets. So the service catalog is going to be vital. It talks about what we want to see in service catalogs, the sorts of things we need to be able to have the service providers describe for us. And that brings me nicely onto the third one, carbon footprint. One of the items in the service catalog is, what is the carbon footprint of that service? This has come out of our knowledge that we have got to, while the cloud is great from a carbon and green perspective. We heard some stuff earlier from the panel about that. We've got to know what it is we're using. We've got to know whether one service provider is costing us more from a carbon footprint perspective than some other service provider. We've got to be able to reason about that. We've got to take that into account along with a whole bunch of other factors in our choices that we make as enterprises. And then we've got to be able to report on it. While the regulatory environment in the carbon footprint space is still evolving, there is going to be a need to report over time. And we're going to need to be able to track that, and we're going to need to be able to track that from our service providers just as much as we track it from ourselves. So standardizing how we do that is going to be important. You can see some of the other ones. VM interoperability is a fairly obvious one today that we obviously need. Standard unit of measurement, the distributed equivalent of the MIP. It's been prevalent in the mainframe world, but is not particularly prevalent in the distributed world. We need to get our heads around that because that's ultimately how we're going to buy it. Boxes, sockets, cores, they don't cut it. They don't express enough granularity. And then on the security side, provider assurance. When you look at that use case, it talks about the fact that as customers, we have multiple types of workload and use and application that we want to put on that. We're going to want to be able to buy varying levels of security depending on what we're about. So providers need to be able to provide a certain level of assurance. This is going to be a huge one for us to get more comfortable adopting the cloud. And the other ones there, just as important. I just picked a couple that are especially relevant to me and ones I feel passionate about. The key message here, though, is that these are out there, they're published. The Alliance is now endorsing immediate use to guide member planning and purchasing decisions, and of course anybody else who wants to pick up on these things. We think they're extremely well articulated and are hopefully going to provide a lot of value to everybody, both providers and consumers going forward. We talked about massive growth. We now have more than 280 global IT leaders involved with the Open Data Center Alliance. We have a steering committee, of which JP Morgan Chase is fortunate to be on. A bunch of contributing members who are people who are also active contributing to work groups, and then an adopter member tier, people who want to see the output and are going to leverage it, incorporate it into their roadmaps and their plans and their purchasing approaches. It's been great to have Intel serve as the technical advisor in all of this. They are non-voting. They really are an enabler for us as a organization to just help us keep the ball moving and get the momentum we need, as well as the technical input we need. But we do obviously acknowledge that we need other technical input from other providers and other members, which is why we've started taking on board providers as members too, and I'll get to that bit in a minute. So looking forward, what are we hoping to see happen? So we've launched these things. Proof of the pudding's really in what happens after that. We're hoping that within 6 months we're going to see industry roadmap integration. So we're going to start seeing products from providers that start referencing the use cases that we've put out there, and how those are going to be satisfied in their product roadmaps over the course of the next 18 months. And within 18 months, and this varies by subject area from the previous slide, some areas are much harder to attack than others, but certainly some of the easier ones we're hoping within 18 months we're going to start being able to see these things leveraging standards out there that we're going to be able to talk about in a much more consistent and coherent way. Finally, the other key point of the, along with the use cases, the announcement of these partnerships with the Open Data Center Alliance. On the left-hand side, we're talking about the kind of liaisons we need with the standard-setting bodies. You know, there's enough standards out there for all of us. We don't need any more. So the last thing the Open Data Center Alliance wants to do is start authoring more of them. We do want to start partnering with the guys that know how to do this and have these in flight, already have good ones, etc. And we want to start augmenting those with the use case requirements. So the Cloud Security Alliance, the DMTF, OASIS, and TM Forum are out of the gate 4 key members that we're partnering with. We're not going to stop there, but we think they are extremely important to the cloud space, and we're going to work hard to engage in the right working groups and the right bodies in those organizations, some of which are very large, obviously, to get the requirements and the use cases understood and develop standards that then help support those use cases. And then we will start adopting those standards in those use cases as part of the Open Data Center Alliance. And then finally, probably most exciting of all, is the solution delivery partners that are now starting to join up with the Open Data Center Alliance. We kept the solution delivery partners out of the Open Data Center Alliance to start with because we wanted as a customer group to really get our own kind of feet firmly planted on the ground, get some use cases established, get a way of working established, so that we weren't unduly swayed by any particular vested interest. We've done that. We did that in the 7 months. And now it's time to open the Open Data Center Alliance up further to get the huge technical talent and skill and experience that many of these solution delivery providers can bring to the table. And I'm very excited to say that Dell, EMC, Parallels, and Red Hat are 4 of the very early joiners to the Open Data Center Alliance in that category. So we're delighted to have them on board. And on that note, I would like to hand over to Brian Payne. Brian is Executive Director of PowerEdge Marketing at Dell, and he's going to tell us a little bit about why the Open Data Center Alliance is important to them.
Great. Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to be a part of this, incredible change that's going on in the industry with the Open Data Center Alliance. At Dell, I lead a team that's responsible for developing our server portfolio and delivering that product, or delivering those products to market. So specifically, we're responsible for defining what we offer. And I'm fortunate in that Dell, with our business model of direct relationship with customers, that we have over 5 million connections on a daily basis with customers. It generates tons of insight, tons of data. In fact, to be frank, it's an overwhelming amount of data to sort through and figure out, how do we how do we pick our path? So when I heard about the Open Data Center Alliance, I thought, hey, my job's about to get a lot easier. It's going to focus the end user requirements. But seriously, I'm really not interested in having time for my home improvement projects. I'm focused on how can we form some centers of gravity around solutions that will accelerate the adoption of the cloud. And I think that's where the ODCA is going to be a great voice of a large organization or a large numbers of end users and really focus the requirements, because in our daily interactions that we have, we hear the requirements, we hear the concerns around security. How can I guarantee that if I put a service out with a software hosted out into a public cloud, that I can guarantee that I'll meet all the security requirements that my company has? How can I ensure that I can get the performance I need because of, as Adrian pointed out, that I can guarantee that I get the I/O bandwidth for a given application that's been deployed in a virtualized environment. There are ways to solve some of these problems, but there's no standard way to do it. And so everyone is left to their own, ingenuity and innovation to create a solution for these problems. And that's time consuming and not perhaps the most efficient way to attack things. And that's where the ODCA can come in and help and organize the industry and help get momentum around certain focal points to create new solutions. Now, the last point as we talk with end users, the thing we hear about is the concerns around lock-in and proprietary solutions, and especially related to the whole point about I/O control. There are a lot of proprietary solutions that to use Jason's analogy, could create storm clouds in your cloud deployment. And so these are areas that need to be addressed. And at Dell, we're excited to jump in with the ODCA as a solution provider and have this be a part of our planning process to drive, again, center of gravity around what we do. If you think about the ODCA, and if I reflect on how we approach solution development at Dell, I think there's a lot of good overlap. So the tenets by which we use to develop solutions, and I should add, before I hit the tenets, Dell is focused heavily and has been focused on developing solutions for the cloud space. So, going back, 4 years ago, we recognized some of the changes afoot in the industry and spun up an organization within Dell that was focused on helping build out the big public clouds that build out the infrastructure of the big public clouds that you see in place today. And through that, we learned a lot, and that those learnings have guided some of the future development we've done, as well as our integration and acquisition strategy. So as we think about new technologies that are available in the market and technologies that can help us solve some of these problems around security and application integration, that's where we focused our efforts with acquisition of Boomi. So you can see out in the booth that Boomi is a software as a service integration platform that can help us go develop solutions tied to the ODCA's usage models. Scalin is another one where we acquired a company to help us with I/O fabric management in a heterogeneous environment. And so the point here is that especially in that last one about the Scalin is all of there are some common tenets for the things that we're doing that I think align well with the ODCA, and one of those is about being open. So delivering solutions that give you choice at key points in your solution stack, and to the degree that we can get focus and standards around how these interactions between different parts of technology will occur, that will be incredibly helpful. But along, Adrian made this point, we don't want to give up on capability. There's still room for innovation. There's still room for doing innovative things in our solutions, but just focusing those efforts by focusing on usage models that will serve a broad customer base. And then finally, a point that we always hold very, very important at Dell is the idea of delivering affordable solutions. So we've got a long track record of PCs to what we're doing in the data center, of being that driver of affordable open solutions, and that's something that we think is a great foundation for our relationship with the ODCA. We think that there's a great opportunity for us to commit and help the input that we're getting with these usage models guide some of our product planning in the future. And so very excited to be a part of this, and I think there's a lot of great opportunity ahead.
Great, thank you, Brian. So we mentioned the three elements to getting to a Cloud 2015 vision and strategy. And one thing I did want to highlight about the work that Adrian and his counterparts have done in the Open Data Center Alliance is my experience is that to get to the level of depth and get to the level of work product that they've done in a matter of months, it usually takes an industry body something like 2 years to get to that kind of level. And it just goes to show the level of focus, and when you bring a group of end users who have a common initiative, a common vision, that they can move things forward pretty quickly. I now want to talk a little bit about how we bring products and technologies to market, and then how we make it easier for people to deploy. So the first thing I wanted to highlight around the products is what we've noticed as we've worked with many cloud services providers is that when you get down to the data center after you've established this infrastructure, 75% of the total cost of ownership of running that data center comes down to the cost of equipment and the power consumed in running that equipment in the data center. And that's really where our product and technology focus has come from Intel, is to look at how we can bring all of the capabilities, all the technology assets that we have to go address that 75% and to work on some of the key problems and initiatives. The first thing I want to highlight is that, of course, we as a company are known for our silicon, and we intend to use our transistor budgets, intend to use what we do with Moore's Law to build in the capabilities for better security, to do hardware root of trust so that the platforms that you know that you're bringing up within a cloud have some established root of trust to them. That we use it for greater performance, for more cores. We're about to introduce our 22 nanometer generation of silicon so that we can deliver more performance and a lower cost per virtual machine within a cloud infrastructure. We want to go enhance the optimization of technologies. We helped to introduce a technology called Node Manager that Dell is one of our key partners in delivering to the industry, to make sure that when you want to manage the power of the servers within the data center, that you can measure them, that you can cap them, and you can go ahead and make informed decisions about where your workloads load in a very efficient manner. We work to go optimize software, and we want to make sure that the compilers, the tools, the infrastructure itself is as optimized as it can be for the workloads that you want to run in the cloud. We're also working to make sure that the data centers themselves are more efficient. We want to see cloud data centers run at ambient temperature. We want to run those data centers hotter. We want to be able to do things that dramatically improve the power utilization and effectiveness. And by working to go address some of the requirements that Adrian talked about with regard to carbon footprint, we want to make it more transparent that what you do within the data center, how that translates into the carbon footprint and managing your cloud. And we have a number of success stories, which I'll let you read through, but we've been working for many, many years to deploy these types of technologies for companies like Baidu, which is a leading search engine in China. We worked with Facebook, for example, around their Open Compute Platform initiative recently, and some of the leading service providers in the industry like Terramark to drive this type of technology and efficiency. And we now want to make sure we bring this to the broad market in deployment of cloud. The other element and the last element of the strategy is just making it easier for people to deploy cloud solutions. There's a tremendous amount of fear, and many companies have come to us saying, my CFO is telling me I have to have a cloud strategy, and I don't know where to begin. And what we've done is we've initiated a program called the Intel Cloud Builders Program to work with many leading companies. You can see it's basically a who's who in the industry to deliver almost 30 reference architectures and solutions so that if you want to get a head start on how to do a deployment for an infrastructure as a service, you have a reference architecture. And this is not a two-page blueprint. This is a detailed document and guide that shows you the elements that need to come together, how to deploy, and actually to get you up and running based on a real deployable solution. So we at Intel are committed to bringing all of these elements together. First, we have a vision that we want to work toward, and we want to work with you toward that Cloud 2015 vision where the data centers are federated, where the facilities are automated, and that the services are client aware and delivered in the right place at the right time to the right type of consumer. Second, we are firmly committed to this Open Data Center Alliance. We think it is the right vehicle, the right center of gravity to have a voice of the end user that moves the industry forward based on their requirements. And you can see the momentum, and I'm very excited that we now have the first release of these public usage models out to the industry for comment, for review, and to start moving the industry forward and laying that foundation. And last, we want to work through the Cloud Builders program, and if some of you are solutions providers or vendors and want to be part of that program, we certainly would like to work with you on that as well. If there's one thing that I hope you walk away with is that Intel is very committed to moving the industry forward on cloud computing. And I do not think this is a zero-sum game. It's not about competing with the vendor next to you. It's really about how users, vendors, solutions providers, service providers can work together to lay the infrastructure and move the industry forward. I think the three of us will be wandering around for a bit here after the show. If there's anything we can do or collaborate on, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Jason Waxman. Thank you, gentlemen. We now go